Hello, everyone. I am Dave Cupp. Welcome to Before the Court, and welcome back to part 2 of last week's episode about the shooting of A.J. Crooms and Sincere Pierce. We're picking up right where we left off last week. We're going to bring our panelists back in. We're going to get back into the second part of the video that we were looking forward to getting to last week. And a little extra bonus tonight, I'm going to challenge our panelists a little bit. I don't want to give them too hard of a time, but I'm going to challenge them a little bit about some things from last week. Let's go ahead and bring on in the panelists. I can't wait to get started this week. There's the panel of experts. As usual, our dear friends of this program, Joe Gandersky, retired Deputy Chief of Detectives, Chicago PD, Heather Waddell, Criminal Defense Counsel, Aric Anderson, author of the Blue Book, The Talk, A Black Community's Guide to Police Etiquette. Panelists, thank you so much for being back. I have a point to try to make to you all this week. I want to go back to something that we spoke about in the first part of this episode last week. We talked about the militarization of the police. We've talked about that police should not be driving around in tanks. And we talked about all of these factors things that are being considered in the community, things that are being legislated and thought about and trying to be decided on right now. So after thinking about that topic all week and doing a little research, I found a couple things, and I want to share a new opinion I have with you guys and see what response you have. The first article I want to talk about and show you is an article called How Police Departments Got Billions of Dollars of Tactical Military Equipment, and it's from a source called Marketplace Morning Report. And it basically explains the 1033 federal program was instituted in 1997 under the Clinton administration amid pressure to bolster police forces' ability to fight the war on drugs. Supporters of 1033 point out that it's not all weapons got by the police departments. Much of the gear transferred is mundane items like office supplies and clothing. But critics say that access to high-powered weapons and tactical vehicles allows local agencies to build outsized police forces and encourages police violence. It says that the militarization of police is contributing potentially to the higher rates of violence that we're seeing more ubiquitously in this particular movement that's happening right now. It also says that things like armored vehicles, assault rifles, grenades, and something called a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle, or an MRAP, are the things that are commonly given to police departments. Okay, so let's look at that again. Things like armored vehicles, assault rifles, grenades, and something called an MRAP, okay, which is an armored vehicle. Just go with me here for a second. I want you to see where I'm going with this. The second article that I'm looking at is from the ACLU. And this article is titled, Towns Don't Need Tanks, But They Have Them. Keene, New Hampshire has a population of 23,000. Keene's violent crime index, about half the national average. Good thing the Federal Department of Homeland Security gave Keene money to buy a Bearcat, an armored counterattack vehicle used by the military. Basically a tank, what they're saying. It's like a tank, an armored vehicle, right? Control room, please bring up slide 3. This is the homepage of a company called Lenco, who makes the Bearcat. Lenco is the manufacturer of this particular product. They're made for the police. Not only are they made for the police, but they're not made for regular cops to drive around and become acquainted with the community like they're on patrol in a car. They're made for SWAT teams and bomb disposal units. And they're made for hostage situations, particularly violent things, raids on like drug dens or gang drug labs, gang locations. Control room, can you bring up slide 6 and 7, please. There's Bearcats in use by the police in hostage situations. There's a bomb disposal robot behind one. And lastly, slide 5, please, control room. Okay, protecting our nation's defenders. This is the Bearcat manufacturing page that describes its vehicles for use for law enforcement. Most widely trusted SWAT vehicles in North America. Lenco vehicles are in use by over 700 U.S. federal, state, and local law enforcement teams to respond to active shooter scenarios, barricaded suspects, response and rescue, and high-risk warrants. I think that there is a terrible misconception about the militarization of the police. I'm not saying that in some cases the police don't have too much weaponry. What I am saying is that I haven't found a single department. I've been searching all week. I haven't been able to find one. Viewers, if you know a department that has a tank, email us at info@beforethecourttv.com. I have not been able to find a single department that has a tank. I found 8,000, according to Lenco, departments that have Bearcats, armored vehicles, and MRAPs. What I've come to find out is that the Lenco Bearcat bought brand new is several hundred thousands of dollars. And that the used MRAPs, which are the same thing but made by somebody else, gotten from the military, are gotten by for just the cost of shipping it. My new opinion on the militarization of the police is now a question for local taxpayers. Turns out the police do need personnel carriers. Would you rather spend almost $1 million for one or get one for the cost of shipping? Heather, talk to me about it.
I mean, obviously, if it's saving taxpayers money, that would be the way to do it. But
but is what I'm interested in.
These departments are getting these anyway? Is that what you're saying, essentially?
I'm saying that the departments are most likely going to get them anyway, especially after the first school shooting or particularly violent thing in their community, right, where they don't have one, then they are going to get one. So they're going to charge the local taxpayer or their budget however much to buy one new from Lenco, or they can use this program and just pay for the shipping and get a used one that does the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see a problem with that if those are the two options.
Well, the third option is we can let them not have one.
Well, then, I mean, that would be the option that I would choose. And then you can use that money, however little it is for the shipping or however much it is to get one new, for something else. Put it in toward, again, things that can be used toward community outreach to prevent things like from happening that would require a result in thinking people need tanks. Like if you do some preemptive care, then you don't really need to do the triage afterwards, I guess, is my point.
That's true, but which one comes first? How do we take the armor away from the police before we've disarmed everybody?
I don't know that we can or that we do. I don't really know a good solution for that, except to kind of have everybody do one night where everybody brings in all the weapons and burns them in a fire and throws them into the ocean. I don't know. Make a new roof.
Aric, talk to me here. What do you think about the militarization here? Or about these Bearcats? Should departments have these?
It depends on the department. I think in the big city, you definitely would need something like that. You're going to more likely run across criminals where you need to have countermeasures, I guess. I don't know if that's the right term, but they're going to need to have the right defenses to help them take down the bad guy. So I think in some cases it's very warranted. I would argue the comment about are the police becoming violent because of the weapons that they're receiving versus are they being violent because of the lack of consequences that happen to them?
Well, that's certainly a question. I might consider that a little off the topic of the personnel carriers, but that certainly is a question to explore. because I'm not sure what to make of that notion. The same comment you're talking about, that the police have these weapons and therefore they use them. Joe, jump in here.
You have a school shooting, okay? Active shooter at a school, right? You have a, excuse me, you have a personnel carrier. You train for those things. You back the thing up and maybe allow the kids to escape inside the personnel carrier. Now you know they're safe. You don't have it, you have to plan on not using it. What I'm saying is, if you look at any of the riots that occurred in the big cities last year, did you see any tanks? Did you see any personnel carriers? Did you see any personnel carriers when they tried to take down the Columbus statue being used? No, because the mayors wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't allow that stuff. So it doesn't mean we don't have them. We have those turtle outfits with the heavy armor. Do you see any Chicago police officers during the riots with those on? No, because they weren't allowed to use them. So you have to understand the purpose of these things. You don't see police officers running around in tanks every day, okay, in the neighborhoods. If it was up to the city, they'd be running around in Ubers, in blue blazers, okay? But when you need them, and if you plan correctly and train for the correct response and use them judiciously when you need to have them, of course, you don't legislate your department by equipment by how much it costs. So these things are cheap. Let's get 25, Abrams tanks because we can get them. It's a matter of policy. It's a matter of common sense. It's a matter of having people in charge, leadership that understands how they're going to be used, when they can be used, how they can be obtained, where they can be stored, and develops SOPs when they need to be used. Like I said, the police on a daily basis, and if you watched anything that happened in the city last year, basically they were outnumbered, outgunned, outweaponed, and they fought violently, to try to go home at night without getting a frozen water bottle stuck in their head.
I think the opinion that I've started reaching about this one particular topic, and we'll move on. I think the opinion that I formed is not whether each department should have one or not. I think the opinion I formed is that I believe a lot of people, including the people who wrote these articles I found, believe that these vehicles and weapons are going to be or are becoming the norm for patrol officers who should be out there maintaining relationships with the community and responding to calls. But the reality is that these vehicles and weapons are being acquired for, I believe, not daily use at all, but for the particularly violent events that we're starting to see unfold more and more in our community that thankfully are rare, but becoming too common. School shootings, hostage situations, things like that. And I think that that's a misconception in the general public about what these things would be used for. That's, I think, the opinion I formed. Aric, jump in.
Yeah, Joe said it. I hit the nail on the head, and I think you're moving in the right direction. So in California, I come from a city that's 6 square miles, and I think I mentioned before that we have a SWAT team with one of these vehicles. Our city doesn't need it, but I think criminals know we have something like that, and they stay out of the city. But two of the cities that touch us, I know the police department loans out that SWAT vehicle to those teams when needed, and I think it was just a way to generate revenue. I think the only times that we see it out is once a year. There's a community fair, and it's out there, and the police are showing what they do for the city and displaying the SWAT equipment and all that. So it's not out every day. You don't see that thing running around the city.
Heather, where you at?
I keep coming back to this, especially when Aric just said that Joe said something that hit the nail on the head. And it's about having all of this equipment and using it. And I heard it last week, actually. in response to some of these videos we've been watching and some of this violence that's been happening with a lot of military officers, people that have access to weaponry, militia-grade equipment, guns at all. If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So when you have this equipment and you have access to these just kind of, again, military-grade weapons and vehicles and things like that, I think the concern does start to be they could use this. So I was actually driving up Michigan Avenue earlier, and for anyone who's familiar with Chicago, it's the Magnificent Mile, and there's a bunch of shopping and high-end stores and things like that. And during the George Floyd riots over the summer, some stores were broken into, a Ferragamo, something else, and the mayor couldn't stand for that, and so since then, essentially, there's been just about 2 or 3 squad cars on every block for almost the entire mile up Michigan Avenue. And I saw them this afternoon. There were 2 of them on each block with their blue lights flashing. And I started thinking, these are just regular squad cars, but this looks like a police state. And so thinking about the fact that they could also use just things that they have at their disposal to use to make a show of force. I don't know. There's something about having the equipment, knowing they have it, and having these weapons, knowing they have them, that they can use them, and thinking that they're heroes for not using them. There's something to be said, I think, with being armed to the teeth, and that's why a lot of these things tend to happen. So I don't know about having all of this extra equipment that doesn't seem to be needed everywhere.
Go, Joe.
The fact that they were in squad cars and not tanks proves the point. It's a show of force because somebody burned the city down, okay, and burned these buildings down, okay? So it's the same thing that happened after 9/11 when you go to New York and see a squad of cars pull up and officers come out with machine guns and just stand at Midtown Manhattan and just stand there, okay? These officers weren't pulling people over. They just pull the button and turn their lights on. Basically, first of all, I don't necessarily believe it's a good policy, but that's not my purview right now. I'm retired. But when you need to show, you have. We used to do when we'd have a protest that got out of hand. We just pull up the wagons, turn the wagons, open the doors, turn the lights on the wagons. Basically, people understood. All right, it's time to go home. And regarding another remark, police don't, because they have the hammer, don't look at everything like a nail. It's not the way they think. Okay, these are not. It's just not what they do. You see it here. You see it. You see it every day. They use force that's necessary. They're not thumping everybody up and down the street. And as far as a school shooting, to put money in something else so you could prevent a school shooting, it's not going to happen. Eagle Rock, what was it? The one up there? That was unpreventable. That guy walked in there to kill everybody. I mean, so what you need to have the tools that will minimize the use of force, will minimize the death and destruction caused by people who are, for whatever reason, trying to destroy something, whether it be a city, a person, a school, or students, or human beings.
We can come back to this topic, but I want to keep moving on to something else. There was one other thing that I think will be a little bit more somber of a topic to go back to from last week. Control room, can you bring up slide 8, please? The headline is not what we're here to talk about. This is a guy who shot his cousin and then shot 2 police officers who pulled him over. Killed one, shot the other one survived. Control room, go ahead to the next slide, please. It's 9, I believe. He told detectives in the February 28th taped interview that he was trying to flee after the crash, but the cops came right behind me within 2 minutes. He said the arriving officers did not have their guns drawn when they approached. I delayed it. I should have smoked them quicker, he's heard saying on the tape, telling the detectives later that they didn't come out with both guns pointed, because if they would have come out with both guns pointed, it would have been a whole different ballgame. Next slide, please, control room. asked by detectives if he had anything to say to the Whittier Police Department, Mejia said, I mean, train your guys better. Train your guys better. They just got a taste of an LA gang member. Thank you, control room. That's all. Last week, we were talking about the notion of police putting their guns down and approaching and assessing without their guns drawn. What the hell do we do here? Aric.
Well, I'm not familiar with that, with what was going on there. But if I don't know, if you have a gang member in front of you, that's a whole different ballgame. I think the overall percentage of the population versus gang members is still low. I think officers should still assess the situation that they're in front of before they even get out of their cars. If they have a car stopped in front of them, I mean, just for their own safety.
Heather.
I think I brought it up exactly this point last week, that there's variations between different departments, there's variations between different cities, there's variations between all jurisdictions, and there's variations between how each officer in and of himself or herself responds to each incident. And that's because hopefully they're using their training, their experience, etc., to say, this is different than this, and here's how I need to respond to this versus this. So I'm not saying that every time they get out of the car, they need to not have their weapons drawn. I think there are some times when it's absolutely appropriate to have their weapons drawn for their safety, for the safety of others around them, to stop an incident that's going on. But I think that there are also plenty of times when they absolutely do not need to draw their weapons. And I think that there are, again, I've seen thousands of videos of clients and, people getting stopped, arrested, pulled over. There are plenty of times when the officers don't draw their weapons. And there are plenty of times when they do. In a situation like this, obviously, they needed to use their judgment and, draw their weapons, hopefully. In something else where there's maybe possibly a situation where somebody's armed, but you don't know, and it's broad daylight and it's, maybe a nonviolent crime that's going on, I don't see why drawing your weapons off the bat is necessary. That being said, this is a different topic, but yeah, I think that there just needs to be discretion, and I think there is discretion very often in situations where, as long as officers are assessing each situation as it's given to them and not just going in with the same attitude and the same responses to each situation, I think that there are good responses.
Joe, what's your take on it? Did they screw up, or did they not know who they had?
I mean, Heather's on the right track. The thing is, it's like Heather even said, she's seen situations where the same officers reacted differently under different circumstances. It's a perception, okay? Like the perception, and I don't mean to, but I just wanted to address this about the idea that a general perception that we're giving high school kids guns in a couple of weeks of training. And, I knew that was wrong, but I wanted to get to strengthen that a little bit and comment on it today. The Chicago Police Department gives officers 900 hours of training, recruits, 900 hours. That's hundreds of more hours than is required by the Illinois State Board that licenses police officers, okay? So you have to be 21, you have to have a 2-year degree, or a service in the military for 2 years or so. So this is a misconception that goes around the United States that we're just handing out guns and telling them to go get the bad guy. It's not. It's wrong. They get constant. Then they're on probation for 6 more months and working with field training officers and rated. You can get fired before you're a sworn police officer, before you're off of probation. You could get fired on a piece of paper signed by a supervisor at the training academy. This Gandersky pulled his weapon. He shouldn't have. He caused a disturbance that resulted in 3 officers getting hurt, etc. Fired. No police board. No 2 years of back and forth with the union and stuff like that. Fired right then. One piece of paper. Happens all the time. So, it's not a perception that's true of what some people have. And it's a process. Yeah, police officers depend on having some protections for their rights, just like citizens do. Police officers are citizens, by the way. So I mean, they need to have themselves protected too. But it's the idea of common sense and understanding the situation. Again, that situation of this shooting boiled down to the fact that all of a sudden, in a split second, a car was driven at a guy. If he has the same right as a civilian to protect himself, and he shot into the car. So when you read the account of it and you see what the activist lawyer said about it, that they basically the officer put himself in a position to purposely kill these kids. I mean, the police can't defend that because they can't hit the hot button issues in the press. So now they're already operating from a position of having to defend their actions, and they can't do it because of legal ramifications. So it gets sent in the neighborhoods. They killed an unarmed guy. How many times did we get here in Chicago on shootings? Oh, they assassinated him, put him down on the street, and they shot him right in the back of the head. He never had a gun or anything. I mean, so these perceptions persist, and they are detrimental to the idea of the community and the police getting to know each other and working together.
Jump in, anyone.
That there was something from last week, same thing with that. Joe actually said it. I think he said, if you put anybody in that situation, if a car starts driving at you, everybody would have done the same thing. And I think it's important to understand the difference between, the fact that police aren't just anybody. They're not. They should be, and I mean, need to be held to a different standard than just anybody. We have terms in the law of like negligence, where you have to decide whether somebody may have behaved the same as a reasonable person in a reasonable in this reasonably similar situation. And a reasonable police officer is different than just the reasonable person, because they have different training. They have access to weapons and equipment that if somebody else was just standing there and a car drove at them, how many other people are just armed, just carrying guns around with them on the street, that if a car drove at them, they'd be able to just fire into the window? So because they have, with great power comes great responsibility, because they do have these powers. And yes, they're putting their lives in jeopardy when they go out there to protect everybody, but that's also a risk that they hopefully understand the gravity of that. And we can all be thankful for that. I was thinking about it the other day. I'm thankful that there are people that if something goes wrong, I could call the police and somebody could show up. I'm thankful for that. But I think that there needs to be some sort of gravitas on these people, that they need to understand that they aren't just anyone, that because they have these powers, have maybe to take that one extra step to determine how to react in certain situations. Because I think I said it last week, I don't know, a car's never just driven at me, full speed at all, just driven toward me. So I don't know how I would react. If I had a gun in my hand, I don't know that I would shoot it toward the windshield. I might try to, as futile as this might be, I might try to shoot toward the tires. I might try to just jump out of the way. I might scream for somebody else to help. I'm not certain. So I just don't quite think it was fair to say that if you put any person in that situation, that they would have done the same thing. If everybody in that situation would have had a gun in their hand, maybe that's a different story. If everybody in that situation was charged with protecting the community and, stopping violence, stopping crime, but also trying to keep the peace, that's a different standard to be heard. But so I think that it's unfair to say that everybody would have reacted that same way.
Could I echo with?
Yeah, go.
To a certain point.
So I think I agree with what Heather is saying there, because I look at it, if Joe Citizen is standing in front of a vehicle and that vehicle is coming towards them, they don't have a gun, they're going to move out of the way, hopefully and not be injured. As a concealed carry person, I think you're held to a higher standard. And I am convinced that if someone with a concealed license was in the same predicament and they did not move out of the way if they did not move out of the way and they opted to shoot into the car and killed someone, they would be arrested on the spot. They would be charged with murder, just right from the get-go. So yeah, I think the laws are a little different for even those three segments: the citizen with the right to carry, and a police officer. So there's different laws, different rules for those three different people.
Well, this is a good question I want to find out. Joe and Heather, what's the reality? Would a citizen be arrested and arrested is one thing, charged and prosecuted is another thing. Would a citizen who somebody was trying to run over with a car, pulled out a gun and shot into the car and shot the person, arrested, probably. Charged? And if charged, would they be convicted? Joe first.
Okay, I agree with Heather to a certain point, and this is the point. Police officers have a responsibility, but their responsibility is not to sacrifice their lives to protect somebody else's unreasonably, okay? So my only thing is this. They had a gun. If he had the gun in his holster, he probably would have been run over. He probably would have been seriously injured or killed. So would everybody else. There's no time in this particular case. If you look at and break it down second by second, there was no time to decide to pick a tire, pick a target, pick a mirror, pick anything. He just reacted instinctively. And my point is, as anyone else might, who happened to have a gun in their hand, as a possibility to save themselves, okay? It's instinctive rather than, there's no traffic stop training that I would ever be aware of that would show, here's what you do if a car's running at you. It's just, here's the way you don't have to shoot the guy if a car's running at you, okay? What I'm saying is that particular circumstance was dictated by the split-second decision based upon those 2 seconds or half a second in which the car turned in this direction, period. The guy is, but what I'm saying is, as far as a concealed carry guy, would I lock him up? I might bring him into the station to question him as to what happened, but would I be asking for charges in the same situation? No, I wouldn't. And because as a detective, I might have to run it past the state's attorney for sure, as part of, here's the circumstances, here's what it is. And that's a decision the state's attorney would have to make. But if there's a citizen who's got concealed carry has a right to protect his own life, I mean, again, individual circumstances. The car's a block away, squealing his tires, and this guy's in the street, and he's running at him. No, there's a million things you could do, but before you start shooting. But this wasn't that. This was not that. So
Heather, okay, now you. This goes to court.
So like Joe just said, before it would get to court, it would need to be approved by a state's attorney in felony review. So they would need to look at it. Like you said, somebody might be brought in, so they would go, okay, what the hell happened here? Especially if the person has a concealed carry or it's a cop and they have the right to have the gun. And I think in a situation like this, whether it was a cop or somebody with this concealed carry, I think they would all need to be questioned. And I don't know, again, how this shook out with like an investigation, but I would have absolutely done an investigation with this officer. I wouldn't have necessarily charged him. But same thing with anybody. Okay, so you look at what's happening. There's a fundamental, like Joe just said, instinct to defend your own life, right? To keep your life. And that's why we have self-defense as an ultimate defense to murder in the first degree. If you have self-defense, it's a complete not guilty if the jury believes that what your response was reasonable. If your response was unreasonable, but you believed it was reasonable, but it's kind of a little twist there, you can get second degree because you believed that you were reasonably protecting your life from imminent danger, but on the outside, it was unreasonable. Okay, so even that, it's a huge cut down from first degree murder. So what a state's attorney would do in Illinois, at least, is look at the information that they got from the officers or from the detectives looking into this person that they brought into the station. And they would say, okay, is this a self-defense situation, or is there too much of an up in the air? And sometimes there's too much of an up in the air, so they charge it. And then it goes to court, and then it's up to the lawyers. It's up to, me or a public defender or whoever to put on a case showing that this person did have to, in a split-second decision, defend their own life. And then it goes to the jury to decide whether that was reasonable or not. So it's a multi-step process there. But once it gets to court, once it's been charged, and I've dealt with a lot of self-defense cases, and, it doesn't matter who you are. You can be a gangbanger. The state's attorneys will sometimes try to paint my clients as these just like awful guys with a past. Guess what? They're still entitled to defend their life if it's threatened, if they're not the first aggressor. So again, things do happen very quickly. They can happen in a second. And if this gets charged, then again, it's up to the attorneys to put forth cases to show why or how this person was defending their own life. And again, that can happen in a split second, and then the jury can decide whether it was reasonable.
Aric, anything you want to add on top of this before I change topics and come after you?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between defending your life versus protecting your life. And I'm not sure a bullet is going to stop a 2-ton vehicle. I don't think that's the answer either, because of course, if the driver is hit and killed, eventually the car will stop. But who's to say the guy's foot doesn't hit the accelerator and drive through the house that's on that lot? So I think protecting yourself would have been maneuvering yourself out of the way before that incident happened. And then if you're in jeopardy of having to defend yourself, then I think you're right to protect yourself in that situation.
All right. There's 3 takes on that. Go on, Joe.
One more, just a quick thing. As that incident was occurring, okay, there was probably at least 1,000 street stops going on in this country that were uneventful for one reason or another, in which everybody went home safe, okay? So this is a case, and this is why we have this show, to show that there's exceptions, that there's to analyze it, to have people understand from different perspectives. And I respect Heather's and Aric's totally on these things. There's a lot involved. It's not a lot of things are not clear cut. There's a lot of gray areas, and sometimes they have to be thrown in front of a jury and a judge and worked out.
I'm going to change topics for a second. We're going back to last week, to last week's video. And in fact, I think that both of these conversations so far today have sort of touched on aspects that contribute to this overall picture that we're about to get into. Control room, do you have the video of the aunt speaking at the rally?
We want justice. We want these officers held accountable the same way they hold us accountable when they arrest us. We want to know their backgrounds just like they want to know our backgrounds.
Amen. That's right. That's right.
We want to know who's hiring these people to kill our kids.
Exactly.
We want to know who they are in our neighborhoods. You can't police a neighborhood if you don't know the people.
Tell it.
You won't be able to have a relationship with these people if you do not know what's going on in these neighborhoods. They are trained to kill. And that's what happened. They could have took any other way to dismantle that car, to stop that car, but they did not, because they are trained to kill. It speaks loud, it speaks volumes, and we want answers, and we want justice. I don't care what they say about those boys. I don't care. They weren't doing nothing right then.
Exactly.
They weren't doing nothing right there in that spot.
Exactly.
So it don't matter. They can look up their records. They can look up their backgrounds, their criminal history. Right then, they weren't doing anything wrong. So that's all we want is justice. That's it.
Okay. Before we say anything here, it's the most important thing to me is to note that we just saw a video of a woman in the depths of grief and despair. And I don't show that video to in any way criticize or critique her or her feelings or her emotions in any way. What she said was very interesting in a lot of ways. Aric, what made you write your book? What need was there in the community that you had to answer?
Man, I think when we have the talk as families, as Black families, father as a son, typically, we are always told to comply with orders or with police officers or law authority. And I think by us complying all the time, it really eliminates our basic rights, constitutional rights as citizens, because officers are trained to investigate. And as they ask the questions and we comply with their questions, I mean, we could say almost anything to incriminate ourselves, whether guilty or not guilty. So my book was written because I thought there was a need for our community to understand our basic constitutional rights on what you can say or what you shouldn't say, or even not talk at all, so you don't incriminate yourself.
What's the desired effect that you're hoping to have or have had? I don't know. I mean, I haven't spoken to all your readers like you have. So what is the effect you were hoping to have? And
well,
have you?
I'm hoping that one day that my book is in every household, not just the Black community, but to start, I want to see my book in the hands of the Black community. So when we hear the aunt talk about accountability on the police side, there's got to be accountability on the family side as well. I mean, there was a lot of assumptions in what she said from one side, but it really applies to both sides. And if we're working together, I think we eliminate some of the shootings that we have, or even the false arrest, or even any kind of arrest.
Whose responsibility is it to bring solutions to the table? Are the police at fault and need to change? Is the community at fault and needs to change? Or is this a two-sided story?
It's two-sided. I mean, the community needs to come together with law enforcement to, I guess, get familiar with the community. But, you know, when you're in a large city, that's going to be virtually impossible. But everything should start in your own household.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that. Heather, what's your response to what that woman was saying?
I think, like you said, David, has a lot of different layers. There was something very important that she said about wanting to know these officers' backgrounds the same way they get to look at subjects' backgrounds. And this goes along with what Joe said earlier about training, and I don't remember the exact numbers. I would love for him to chirp back in with CPD versus the rest of the state of Illinois. How many more hours of training were required for CPD? They needed 900.
100, yeah, 900. 900 was the total.
And then how many for the rest of the state?
Hundreds less. It didn't specifically say.
Okay. So just, I don't know. I think I would feel more comfortable having some more transparency with, you know, any of these officers. Yeah, in your neighborhood, if you can kind of have access to a website or something, the same way people have access to websites about sex offenders in their area, to say, where did this officer come from? You know, where did he go to school? Was it a 2-year degree? Was it a 4-year degree? Did he have military experience? Has he been sanctioned? Has he been disciplined? You know, how many times has he fired his weapon in the line of duty? Just things like that, to be able to have everybody, like, all the cards on the table. Because then we'd know maybe, I don't know, if everything is out in the open and you know that people know things about you, I think maybe you're a little more careful, or you're a little more discerning, or you're trying to make sure you do better next time, versus if nobody knows any of the bad things you've ever done, you can just keep doing whatever you want. So there is something to be said about understanding both sides of people's backgrounds. It shouldn't just be that officers can look up a background of a subject or a suspect and that it's not the other way. And when it comes to a criminal case, if this was going to be charged, if the officers were going to be charged, obviously in discovery, we would get access to their backgrounds. We would absolutely 100% get access to all their disciplinary records or any other things like that. So I think that that's important, though, that just generally there needs to be more transparency with these departments and with these agencies, instead of just kind of putting someone on desk duty, or I don't know, the same way they do in like the Catholic Church, just move them over here. Mm-hmm. Now, as to kind of saying at this moment these boys weren't doing anything, I also don't think that's quite fair to say. And again, I'm not trying to take away her immense grief and her pain and her feelings, which were valid. But to kind of just say they were, it's not like these guys were just standing on a street corner. Something was going on. So to do the whole, I'm just purely a victim, these guys were just victims, I don't think is fair. That being said, life isn't fair. So you have to kind of weigh the issues here. Again, is it logical or feasible for a place like the city of Chicago to have an outreach program where every officer knows what's going on in every neighborhood and they know the people in it and they understand each other? Probably not. It's going to be harder to do. In smaller towns, in areas like what that one looked like, it might be easier to do. But again, like Aric said, it's going to be a two-sided thing where you're going to need to have people put in the work on both sides to understand that we're all people. We all want to go home at night to our families, to our pets, to our loved ones, whatever. And the easiest way we can all do that is to kind of, you have to hope for the best, plan for the worst, and hopefully things don't all get out of hand.
Joe, let me ask you about something. It's something that I've sort of preached and talked about for a long time. And this woman in the video touched on the same thing about police officers being involved in the community on a first name personal level, like you've described from the past. But I'm wondering now, today, do the neighborhoods still want the police there? Do the neighborhoods want the police coming in, knowing their names, standing on the corner, hanging out?
Just to give you a little background on that, when I first came on the job, everybody was assigned to a beat. They used to say to myself and my partner and the relief guy, because we all had different day off groups. So for 4 days a week, you'd work with the same guy, and 2 days of your week, you'd work with someone else. Every 28 days, you'd change shifts. You'd rotate between days, afternoons, and midnights, okay? For that entire period, and usually it went on for months, you'd be assigned to a specific beat. They used to say that you were the police chief of your own beat, meaning you were responsible for everything that occurred on that beat. You worked that same beat car. You were confined to your driving to stay within that beat, okay? So that might be 8 square blocks. If it was a busy beat, it might be 30 square blocks if it was a beat in a less crime neighborhood. So you got to know everyone at all different times of day or night. You'd go in the alleys at night. You'd roll your windows down and shut the engine off. Just listen for somebody maybe breaking into somewhere, doing something like that. I'd go into taverns on 18th Street on weeknights early. It was all a Hispanic neighborhood, okay? I'd go into taverns and look around and make my presence known there to let the owners of those taverns know that I'm out there, I'm watching what's going on. I don't want to see anybody with any guns or anything going on here, okay? So you had all this proactive policing going on. You'd see, I remember one time I saw a car double parked. I got out of the car and I looked inside the car. It was a hot summer day and there was a bag. I reached in, opened the bag, sorry, counselor. And hypodermic needles, okay? So I lay back and see who's going to go into that car. The kid comes into the car. It's a kid. It's a high school kid. We grab him. He gives me the sob story. He found him in a garbage can. There was kids in the alley playing. He didn't want to make sure the kids get in trouble, right? I bring him to the station. This is when I was a rookie. My watch commander says, "Did you look at him?" I says, "What do you mean?" He says, "How hot is it outside?" I says, "It's freaking 80 degrees out." He says, "Why is he wearing long sleeves?" Pulled up his sleeves, and he opened up saying that he was a heroin addict, and those were his, and he was in a private school. So you have all these contact. I used to go I shouldn't say this, every morning, but there was a beauty shop, and they'd make me breakfast in the morning. And I would sit there and BS with them. My whole family ended up starting to go to this beauty shop in this Hispanic neighborhood, okay? Because we knew we were part of it, all right? It's gone. It's gone. I had police officers tell me, "Joe, I'm driving down the street. They're yelling at me again. Get out. We don't want you here. Get out of our neighborhood. Get out of here." They got their phones out and everything. But who are these people, okay? Are these people the ones that are prisoners in their own homes because of these gangbangers? So there's going to be a lot of work to be done to get back to that point, because it has to be balanced in some kind of way. And it's going to be very difficult to get back to the community to where it was when I was having huevos rancheros in the morning with my friends in the beauty shop on my beat while I did some walk and talk and got to know everybody on the beat, versus the way it is now. It's just the way it is. But, they're so down so many people. They take from the districts now these beats that are supposed to be a chief of your own beat. That's gone. And they guess where they're at? They're on Michigan Avenue with their lights on, okay? And, what good is that?
No good.
Yeah. Well, it's good for your business if you own a business, and I don't blame the businesses.
Anybody jump in? Don't wait for me. What are we missing about what she said? What did she say that we're missing? Joe, what were they doing wrong in the moment?
I don't know.
Listen. Oh, wait. To that woman, they will forever have been doing nothing wrong, and that's fine. But to the rest of us, what were they doing wrong in that moment?
You know what? I'm not going to criticize a word she says. I mean, she's a woman that's in obvious grief and distress over losing a loved one. How can you, but the problem I have is with somebody coming into that area and racially charging up the community that's not from that community, and, putting a twist on everything. That woman was shot, right?
I think it was actually the other woman. I think it was the mother.
Woman.
Yeah.
She was shot at the funeral of her son.
Which
the teenager had a gun, and what doesn't say what he was doing at her son's funeral. The teenager had a gun, went off and shot himself and her. Oh, by the way, I looked up today and the status of the case, which I really was hoping that they'd come out with some kind of decision. The investigation has been completed, and it's been at the state's attorney's office for review for the last week or so. So they got the talks, they got all the evidence, they got all the interviews done. It'll be interesting to see where that goes.
I think what I heard. Well, I heard what she said was. Actually, I wrote down everything that she said. But when she said she doesn't care what they say about the boys, they weren't doing anything right then. To me, you just assume that, well, maybe they weren't doing something right then, but when were they doing something? So, she said that the police are trained to kill 3 or 4 times, and to me that goes back to the assumption. The police, I understand the emotions and all, but I know police aren't trained to kill other people. There just seems to be these circumstances where there are more than 1% of police officers out there that are more than willing to kill. And, use the law as protection for killing someone.
Heather, where are you at?
I would agree with almost all of that. I think that when you have, I mean, again, having done trials with against officers, having done trials where I cross-examine officers, I've looked at a lot of their training, and of course, they're not trained to kill. They're almost specifically trained not to kill, if we're being honest. And I think, again, because of the publicity of some of these cases and because of just what people see at first sight of a lot of these cases, you see the bad apples more than you see the good ones. And if we're looking at just, violence against people from officers versus violence perpetrated on officers from people, it's about a factor of, I think, 10 times difference of that more people obviously are killed by officers to a factor of 10 than the other way around. But again, that being said, you're in these situations where you're dealing with maybe some very violent people, volatile situations. It's not just everything, it's not every person walking down the street that's not going to necessarily come in contact with these violent, volatile situations on a daily basis. These people specifically are part of a job force in a career and doing what they're doing that's putting them in these situations. Now, I really was uncomfortable with that these guys are trained to kill. I do think that, again, a lot of these guys out there maybe have become jaded, that they start to think that everybody, who might be doing something bad is automatically doing something bad, is automatically a criminal. But I think that's also human nature to kind of become jaded. If you see something so frequently, so often, it starts to build this idea in your head where everything looks the same. But again, just from what I've seen in my own experience, I think plenty of officers use a lot of restraint and do use proper judgment in looking at different situations. So I think the most important thing that she said is making sure that officers, detectives, whoever in the police, understand who they're policing, understand the communities. And Joe was saying it and I've heard it from, old professors in law school that were part of the state's attorney's office back in the 80s. And they would say that people used to know people in their neighborhoods. Detectives and officers used to know people on their beats. They would be able to walk over, share a cup of coffee with them, share a drink with them later that day, talk about their kids. They knew everybody. And now it's become kind of an us versus them. And I think until or unless you can erase that barrier and start to blend everybody back together, that we can just be a couple people having breakfast and guess what? I'm here to protect you if something goes wrong, and not I'm here just to punish you if something goes wrong. I think that's a discernible difference. And again, transparency, I think, is absolutely also key.
I want to add to what Heather just said. Even in my neighborhoods, when I see a constable drive by in the case here in Texas, occasionally I will stop them to just say hello and thank them for being there. Just so they can see that there are people out here that are law-abiding citizens, and not everybody is the same. And I think if more people did that, I think the perception that some people have on one side or the other side would start to change a little bit.
Jump in, Joe.
When I was deputy chief, I was responsible for all criminal investigations north of Roosevelt Road. That was my area of responsibility, half the city. So anyway, it included Area 4, which was at Harrison and Kedzie. And there was really, really a good area of detectives there. This is back in the 2000s. So anyway, they said, "Hey, deputy, hey, boss, you're invited to go with us. We're going to a luncheon." I said, "Luncheon? What? Why invited? Come on, you help us out when you need to. Let's go." So what it was a lady from the West Side who had 2 sons murdered. Okay, and this on the conviction of her second son, because of the work that the detectives did, she took it upon herself, she was a black lady, to treat everybody in that area to chicken dinner on her at her expense. And I was honored to be invited to meet this woman, because she was so happy that the detectives had worked so hard to make sure that the killer of her second son was brought to justice. And, you know, how far have we gotten from that? I'll never forget that. You know, how far have we gotten from that now? It's to too many people's self-interest to keep us separated. Too many.
Question for all three of you. Joe, I'm going to go to you first, then I want everybody's. How damaging is it to Black and brown communities within a city to take police away from that city? Joe.
Just do it economically. Here's a formula that when I was working in administration, I learned about replacement factor, okay? So this is back in the 90s. If you want 100 police officers to show up daily at a certain location, okay, for a certain shift, you have to hire 200. Because days off, sickness, whatever, medical, whatever. So the replacement factor used to be 2 to 1. Now, over the years, up until the time I retired, it kept going, inching up, inching up, inching up, inching up. So I don't know where it is now. But police officers, it takes double the amount of police officers to just man things basically. I had a watch commander tell me that he had 5 or 6 cars where he had put 2 recruits together. That's not supposed to happen because they're so low on police officers. It used to be, I don't know, 17,000 supposedly. I'll tell you right now, there can't be 10,000. There can't. I don't know. You'd have to look at the budget records. So when you take these police officers away from basic unit of patrol, that idea of you have a specific geographical location to be, you have, these are your people, this is your responsibility. The more that you take away from that and use it for other resources like tactical units, narcotics units, the more that you have to pull from that essential beat structure, the harder it is for a community to have proactive policing that's going to make an impact on specific crime. Although, when it's run right, you need tactical officers, you need narcotics officers, you need a detective, violent crimes detective. We had gang investigators. If I had a gang shooting, gang murder, which was 60-70% of them, I'd pick up the phone or go to the gang area and they would tell me the history of the freaking gang. They tell me everybody in that gang, where they're at, what they're doing. It's not him because he's doing time now. They're gone. They're gone.
The reason I'm asking this question is because there's a lady who's had an impact on me over the last few years. I know her from attending community policing meetings with the police and the local resident. And she told me one time recently that her 2 sons don't want the police in their neighborhood at all, but that she is desperate for more police in her neighborhood and doesn't know what it's going to take for the police department to put more officers in her neighborhood. Heather, what kind of impact do the police have on the communities that need them the most?
I think, I don't remember if Aric or Joe said it earlier, there's a difference between people that live in neighborhoods where they feel like they're prisoners in their own homes. Or I have plenty of clients who I'm like, why were you carrying the friggin' gun around? You know, like, you know you didn't have the license for it. Why did you have this thing, you knucklehead? And they're like, I had to. What, am I going to be caught without one? Yeah. Like, and they're not, they're not bad guys. They're the guys that are trying to go to college and like do this other stuff. But they feel like because of the circumstances in their area, they have to be armed. So there are certain people who I know who are in the criminal justice system right now who would love to have more of a a relationship with police, not to be policed, not to have the other coming in, the outsider coming in and just saying like, you're doing this wrong, you're bad, you're doing this wrong, but to be part of it, to say, I'm here, I see what's going on, I hear what's going on, I hear your voices, and I'm here to help, not I'm here to punish you. I'm here to help you. And I think that, again, that line needs to be blurred or taken away. And then, they need police, but it doesn't need to be the other coming in. It doesn't need to be the outsiders coming in to fix a problem. It needs to be, essentially in all of us, a from within, helping raise up a community so that, again, you don't feel like you're just being policed, so that you can feel like you're being helped.
Aric, where are you on that?
Well, Heather's right. No one wants to be told what to do all the time. But I'll start with your question. I think there's a fallacy in the premise of your statement, because it can be construed as Black and brown communities are the ones that need police. There are Black and brown communities that are in the middle class. There's Black and brown communities that are upper class. So when I answer this question, I'm going to answer it in general terms, that I think what we talked about is that people want to feel safe in their neighborhoods, and it doesn't matter where that neighborhood is. The only people that don't want police in the neighborhoods are criminals. They want to be free to do whatever the heck they're doing out there. But law-abiding citizens, which are the majority of people in our country, want to feel safe and deserve to feel safe in their communities. So for me, it doesn't matter if it's Black or brown, white, yellow, tan, doesn't matter. People want to feel safe, and having police in their communities that are interacting with them and being part of a solution and not part of the problem is the direction I think that we should be moving in. So I don't know if you were getting at the defund the police thing again, but it shouldn't be about that. It shouldn't be about fewer officers. It should be quality officers out there.
What I was actually getting at, coming to you right now, Joe, what I was actually getting at was how detrimental will it be to restoring some relationship if we keep taking police officers out of the very neighborhoods where those relationships seem to be suffering the most?
Is that for Joe?
No, that was my answer to you. That's what I meant by my question.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't really about defunding the police. It was about how do we restore these relationships if we're not putting together people to have relationships? Joe, come on.
It's a widespread thing that's just very, very disheartening and hurtful to police officers. And I feel it, and I've been retired, okay? You have a movement among people who have painted the police officers as these oppressors of everything among the population just isn't the Black or brown population. I've never had a problem with working in Black communities, because I have a sense of the same thing. They want to be safe, just what Aric said, just like everybody else, okay? They want to be safe. They understand that they need the police, right? Where do you think all these calls come from? But you have this movement now. I can't tell you how many times I read on police Facebook pages where they say they've gone to some place that like a Starbucks. You call, I'm not waiting on you pigs, or they'll write pig on the thing. This is and they're like, they're all painted with the same brush. They've all been taught. They have no experience with the police. Maybe they got a ticket sometime and they're mad. or they read all the stuff about the police, or they see all these videos and stuff. This is the biggest failure of society relative to the criminal justice situation that I run into. It's this persistent, widespread idea that the police are the problem and not the solution. You walk into a restaurant and the owners, hey, how you doing, Joe? How's it going, Bob? The customers would come by, hey, officer, how's it going? Like Aric said, like he does. That's so appreciated. It's unbelievable. Do you realize how detrimental it is when somebody will go up and say, the owner will come up to a table, a police officer, and say, listen, guys, I'm sorry, but those people are saying they feel offended that you're here because you're wearing guns. I mean, are you kidding me? If somebody walks in, that those officers sitting there have during the time that they're there, the 30 minutes that they get for lunch, have protected everybody in that place. That's why police officers always sit facing the door. If you ever watch that, people that don't know that, they always sit facing the door to want to see what's coming in. They're on duty all the time. They give their lives to protect everybody in that place, and to be treated like this in more and more and more situations, it's unconscionable. It's not fair, and it doesn't lend to this idea of you're part of the community. We want you to be part of the community. We understand your value as human beings. You're not, you're educated, you're trained. One incident of 10,000 incidents going on at the same time every day, 24/7 is not representative of who you are. It's got to be worked out some kind of way.
Jump in.
So, yeah, I love what Joe just said, because I think of me as a citizen and as a black man. I actually go an extra step. I talked about stopping the constables on my street, but I don't care wherever I'm at in the country. If I'm at a restaurant, from fast food, doesn't matter. If there is an officer or a fireman, any kind of service person or military, I will always buy their meal, just because I do appreciate what they have and what they do. And I have been in situations where I've been pulled over and accosted for no reason at all. But I understand that that's not every single police officer. And I want them to at least see, hey, there was that one person, or there was that one black man that bought me a meal. Wow, everybody's not like that. And so I just take it as a responsibility for me to send out a different perspective for police officers.
Heather, anything?
I think that the old adage that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, I think that we're hearing, especially in this time currently where everything is able to be put on the internet, everything's on video, everything's on camera, everything's on audio. The things that are the worst, we see right away, and we see them with what we believe to be great frequency. Whether or not they actually are that frequent, that's left to be said. I know Joe said he sees things in a Facebook group, and Facebook, especially recently, has been notoriously good at creating bubbles of having only one side of a piece of information, resonating chambers, echo chambers. And if you have, one instance of an officer, which is this, it sucks, but an officer going into a Starbucks, like you said, and instead of writing, officer so-and-so, thanks for your service, officer so-and-so, thank you, here's your coffee, writing pig on it. That sucks, and that's hurtful. And then you also have the instance of somebody leaning on someone's neck with their knee while they say, I can't breathe, for 7 minutes. So if you weigh those two things, and those are the things we hear about, I think that, again, it just goes back to we have to all do better at understanding that every person is a human being, that we're all out there pretty much. I've had my own back and forth with this, but everyone pretty much is out there trying to do their best. I don't think anyone's out there trying to do their worst. And if we all kind of do a better job understanding that we're all people, we're all humans, we all are different, and we can celebrate those differences where they're good and try to prevent them where they're bad, I think that there'll be a better understanding that, again, it's not an us versus them. It's not a black versus white. It's not a gang members versus the rest of society. And I mean, because like Joe said, there was a time previously where you could go talk with some of these gangs and there would be a structure and they would be able to tell you what was going on. And now there's just seems to be a lot of chaos. And I think a lot of it is based on people just making snap decisions based on things that they've heard, again, in their echo chambers or just around, and people making decisions based on race or profession or anything like that. And until we understand that every person is just that, a human being trying to do their best, I think things are going to continue to break down. But if we can all, leave our predispositions at the door, I think we can all start to do better.
Amen. Joe?
Just to bring that point to another level, Aric mentioned last week regarding the shooting and the extra footage where the ladies were inside the house that they ran into. His interpretation of that, there was a clip where the officer came into the house, asked him for identification, et cetera, was that these officers were kind of intrusive and a little overbearing and not in asking for all this personal information. But I can understand how he could think that based upon that clip. And this is the problem of what we see every day and sometimes where we're steered every day. And I thought about that clip and I'm thinking, prior to that, in the background, there's emergency workers trying to work on the one of the kids that was shot. So the officer had to come to the house because he hit the house and damaged it. He has to fill out a report. He in the clip even, he says, "Okay, you ladies okay? Is everything okay?" And he asked for this information because he's got to fill out a report, which the ladies are going to use not only for the criminal incident there, but for their insurance, for everything else. So he's making sure that he's got their name spelled right. I have to give everybody that asks me who I am, I give them my driver's license because nobody gets my name right. Never. Grandersky, Gandalewski, whatever. So there was a little girl, if you watched, in that little clip just for a split second, she comes and smiles at the camera. Does she look intimidated? So what I'm saying is this idea that the way we judge something based upon what we view, video is a powerful medium. We don't know what went on before that or what went on after that. So it's like we need to have discretion. We need to logically think of things and put our feelings aside. This idea that we all have prejudices. There's no doubt about it. Everybody who's a fair person has to resolve that and not let those prejudices interfere with their professional responsibilities on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it's easier to do than others. Sometimes it's not. But like Heather said, we all got to try to be better. We got to try to do better. Things aren't always as they look.
Panelists, we are not going to solve this world's problems in this one episode. I'm sorry to say. I was hoping we might, actually. But it looks like we'll need another episode or two to solve all of the world's problems. Thank you, panelists, for being with us again this week. Anybody want to add anything that you're just holding on to, waiting to shoot out to close with? Joe?
Just real quick, I'm going to lunch tomorrow, and I would like Eric's credit card number so he can.
Hang on, I'll get it for you.
As a gesture of goodwill.
Wait a second, I'll go to lunch too if it's Eric's pleasure.
Hey, just call me when you're there. I'll Venmo you the money.
I appreciate you guys.
Panelists, thank you all so much. This was a little bit deeper one this week, and we didn't really talk about a particular video. There's no, oh, do you want to go back and revisit our justified decisions from last week? Anybody want to change their justified decision, or are we all standing by it?
I'll stay by mine.
I'll stand by mine.
Stand by your man. Stand by.
Okay. Panelists, thank you. And we will reconvene with regular episodes next week. And boy, I have so many points that come up every episode, and I just keep having to say, well, all right, in 12 or 15 more, we'll get to everything. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dave.
Joe Gandersky, Heather Waddell, and Mr. Aric Anderson, Blue Book.
Good night, guys.
Thank you all. There we have it, everyone. This is very often a very difficult topic to discuss, especially when we're talking about the words of a woman who has just suffered an unimaginable loss. But picking apart her words is in no way to criticize her or judge her emotions in the situation at all. We're picking apart her words because she touches on some very interesting topics, which are important on a number of levels, according to our panelist, Heather, when we are breaking down the topic at large in our communities. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation this episode. We hope that you found some value in it or something useful you can take from it. If you have questions or comments, or you want to correct something we said, ask about something we said, or if you have a video you want us to review, please go ahead and email us at info@beforethecourttv.com. info@beforethecourttv.com. Until next time, I'm Dave Cupp. We'll see you on the next episode of Before the Court.